Hello and welcome to another episode of Inspired Women Gathering Show. This is a show that talks about all things from life, relationships, spirituality, business, and everything in between. Women are so inspiring, living through their stories, finding resilience, resourcefulness, tenacity, and the powerful impact that we make in the world. I love connecting and having deep conversations, sharing with you the women I am inspired by and so blessed to know. My name is Dixie Bennett, and I'm your host and a Soulful Women and Wealth coach and healer, helping heart-centered entrepreneurial women heal their self-worth, embody their soul purpose, and create sustainable business with heart. And I created this platform to highlight amazing women who I come across and connect with. I hope you enjoy them as much as I do. And I'm so excited to introduce you my beautiful guest, Yvonne Basten, and our topic today is when change happens. Yvonne is a woman of many gifts and talents. She developed her adaptability and positive attitude through her experiences of emigrating to Canada from the Netherlands and 11 years of traveling the globe with her then husband and young family. As the managing director for the Calgary eWomenNetwork chapter for the past 8 years, she has grown in leadership skills, and it is a space where she continuously hones her event organizing skills. She now runs her own event management company, eventmanagement.guru. Anyone who has seen Yvonne in action will have experienced her strong leadership, supporting her team through love, laughter, and her big heart. Any event host never has to worry about anything. Yvonne's motto is, there are no problems, only solutions. You can trust that your online or in-person event will run smoothly from beginning to end. So welcome, Yvonne. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, I find it very interesting. Well, because we first kind of met, we met 8 years ago through the eWomen connection. I think that's the first time I met you. And so I had just started my business, just a couple years before that as well. And then we connected. So I always look, because we've kind of grown up together in our own business experiences. There's been a lot of parallels and, just watching you grow, watching all the women that I've come to know and love, and we've all been navigating through lots of different growth and changes and acceleration and highs and lows. And I'd love for you to really get into your personal story of just a bit about your path and your exploration and global experiences to who you are and what you're offering in the world now.
Perfect. Awesome. I'm looking forward to sharing some of my journey because it's been an interesting one. And feel free to interrupt me anytime you like. My life started actually in the Netherlands in Europe 53 and a half years ago. And I was born and raised there. So I lived my whole youth there until I got married. And then once I got married, she moved right away to Paris. That's really within weeks of getting married that we moved there. And so, a year-long honeymoon in Paris was actually not a bad thing. And that's also where our oldest son was born. So he was born in '89. And then later that year, we moved away from Paris and moved for 4 years to Nigeria. And so that was a beautiful, that's really, I often will say actually a place where I grew up. I was in my early 20s. I was very young, newlywed, new mom, and, discovering the world. I had never been off the European continent before. I literally, when, my then husband came to me and said, we're moving to Nigeria, to actually look it up on a map. And back then there was no internet or anything like that. So I literally had to get out an atlas and, and go find, Nigeria on the map. And then we moved down there, and it's because it's not an easy country to live in. It's quite dangerous at times, and there's lots of corruption and things like that. But having said all that, I had a great time there. I did a lot of charity work when I was living there, and had done some amazing things and met some amazing people along the way. So it was a great time to be there for me. And then from there, we actually moved back to Europe, to the Netherlands for 2.5 years. Lived in 3 different places, and then from there moved to Norway. where we were supposed to be for a few years. That didn't work out the way it was planned. So after 3.5 months,
Oh,
yes, he came home and he said, "You're not going to like what I have to say," which was code for "we're moving."
right.
And so I had barely unpacked and had plans. It's a beautiful country,
Mhm.
Norway, very similar actually to where we lived. We lived in Stavanger, and which is right on the ocean. So even though I say it's similar from where we live here in Alberta, with the mountains, sans the
Yeah.
ocean. But when I was standing in the middle of my street and looked down the street, I could see the mountains,
Oh,
and it's almost similar here, right? So
mhm.
I saw some similarities there once I moved to Alberta. But so we went back to the Netherlands. He ended up actually working in a camp scenario in Angola where no families were allowed. It's just the worker bees that were living in a camp. So he was, flying back and forth, month on, month off, and we did that for a year. And then from there, we moved to Singapore, and we're there for 2 years. Had a fabulous time. Like I love, 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 love Singapore. Love Asia. Made some beautiful trips while we were, down there. And when we first started living there, we realized, or we knew that that was most likely going to be his final assignment for the company. And it was either once that assignment was over, because the moment your work permit stops, then you have to leave the country that you are living in.
Mhm.
You can't just stay for shits and giggles kind of thing.
Mhm.
So we had actually started our immigration procedure to move to Canada, because we had known for quite a few years that it was either moving back to the Netherlands, wherever we were on the planet, or we would move somewhere that we had chosen, that we wanted to kind of settle and provide our two boys some roots for. And so we had in the end decided for Canada,
Mm.
and started. That was when internet was fairly new still, but it did exist. So I started to Google, before Google was actually a verb, and and word was a cool thing to do. And I Googled immigration officers, or companies for Canada, and found one. He was a former immigration officer in Toronto area, and started corresponding with him, and that's how we started the process. And then we landed here officially in September of 2000, and I've been here ever since. It's
Mhm.
probably the longest place where I've ever lived.
Mhm.
And I became a Canadian citizen in April of 2009.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's been a little bit of my, kind of a high level overview of my life, where I've been, where
Mhm.
I've lived.
Yeah, that's so powerful. So tell me a little bit more about, so what would you say is the biggest thing that you learned about being an expat, living in different countries?
Uh-huh. You have to be okay with change because it happens often, and oftentimes you're in phases where you don't know what's going to happen next. So you have to be okay with that too. Sometimes you're going to move, but then it might take sometimes several months before you
Mhm.
even actually find out that you're going to Timbuktu. And and the before my former husband and I started traveling the globe together, he had been in that world for quite some time before that, and it was in a time where it was very abundant in the oil patch, and people could literally choose like beautiful, great places to live, like all the fun places. And we were actually together in a time frame within the oil patch where it wasn't that easy. When they offered you something, you just went. You
Yeah.
didn't ask too many questions, and you
Mhm.
didn't ask for too many favors, and
Mhm.
and so overall, it was a beautiful journey, because I'm one of those people. I'll make home wherever my family ends up being,
I love that.
and we did, and we had a great time doing that together. But it's change was the word of the day, month, week, year, at times, and because at one point we moved like 10 times in 10 years.
Mhm.
So that's a lot of change also for kids. And I also found out that kids are very resilient. They're very adaptable to those situations. And and they were first for me, right? So when we moved somewhere, you know, I would settle them first and make sure that they were okay and that they found new friends, etc. And once they built those little friendships, you know, at the playground or the new school that they're going to, then it's, you know, once they're settled, it's all good. And then I could start looking around, okay, so what can I do here for me to make life interesting? So because I'm not the one that would sit at home, you know, on the couch eating bonbons watching Oprah all day. So
And so what would you say, so what were some of the things that you did to help yourself? So once you got this kid settled, what would you do for yourself? How would you help?
I did, so it varied a little bit in the different places where I was, but for instance, in Nigeria in the 4 years, I did a lot of charity work. So I did, and then, you know, like hands-on kind of things, not necessarily on the fundraising end of things, but more on the, you know, literally going to an orphanage and, you know, help feed children and hold them and play with them and, you know, do those kind of things. The particular orphanage where we went to the most was not too far from we lived, but it was an area where there was no running water. So there were government trucks that would come on a regular basis and deliver water to the orphanage. However, because I mentioned earlier, you know, the corruption, etc., in Nigeria, what oftentimes would happen, you know, before the truck would actually make it to the orphanage, it would have passed a lot of, you know, residential homes. And then people would flag them down and they would pay, you know, the truck driver some money, and then they would take the water, and then the orphanage would be without the water. So, you know, yeah. And then so imagine, you know, a home where there's like 40, 50 little ones living, lots of them still in diapers, and, you know, no Pampers or anything like that. You know, they would have like actual cloth diapers that had to be washed, et cetera, and, you know, and no water. So, you know, then we had to start shaking some trees and ring some bells and go like, hey guys, this is not cool. We need water here. And so those were, you know, the kind of things that I did, for instance, in Nigeria. And I did a few other things there as well. Actually, I was also for a while, the head of the American Women Club's library. And because I was just in a house, a regular house. It was literally on my street, actually. And so it was easy for me to, you know, pop in and out. And, you know, so I would help there and do things and organize and you know, help check out books and things like that. And then I was also helping some Dutch families together with a friend. She was actually the one that originally started it. Helped them adopt some of the children in the orphanage that were not adoptable. So not adoptable means, you know, like a cleft palate, for instance, right? So the Nigerian people would adopt occasionally, you know, little ones from the orphanage, but the emphasis was on little ones, you know, as tiny and as baby, you know, as it could be. They, you know, once a child had passed, you know, the kind of the 1 year mark, they were really not, you know, going to be adopted out by anybody unless, you know, like a white person would come along and say, I would love to have a baby.
Right.
Yeah. So we got a few children out of Nigeria and into some of the Dutch families in the Netherlands who otherwise would have, you know, God knows what would have happened with them in their life. Yeah. Yeah, so that was that. When I was in Norway, there was really not much because I was only there for 3.5 months, so or 4 months in total. So I barely got my feet wet. You know, I had some plans, you know, to start doing things, you know, in the fall once school started up again, because we moved in the middle of the school year. So the kids started school there in kind of February, March, and then we made it till the end of the school year, and then we were gone again. So there wasn't really too much time for me there to do anything other than finding my way around, you know, knowing where the stores are, knowing where to buy what and things like that, and to just get settled. And but then when we went into Singapore, I actually did quite a bit of work at the Dutch club, which had they had a couple of different committees that would organize events. And one of the, well, the one committee was organizing events for both adults and children. And before the summer, they had actually decided that they wanted to break that up and have two separate committees, one just focusing on the adults and one on the children festivities. And so one of the moms walked up to me at one point and said, "Hey, I know you're new and I know you're just, you have just arrived. However, we are planning this and would you like to run this committee?" So I said, "Yeah, sure, of course." So, I gathered a bunch of women and started organizing, different festivities for the kids at the club. And so I had a lot of fun doing that. So that was, on the other side of the scale of instead of, doing the orphanage thing, it was mainly focused on organizing festivities for the kids at the club. So
Powerful.
yeah.
So lots of charity work. So I'm very so very interesting. Just being a natural leader that you are, gathering people together. How would you say, well, when you settled in Canada and decided that this was home, what did you then do? Did you go into charity work here as well, or did you start working somewhere else, or?
Well, over time, yes, I have done, I have focused on different charitable organizations. First, when I started out, I started volunteering at the school. And so I've done, different things there. I was the chair for the fundraising committee at my son's middle schools. I organized all the volunteers, from the school, all the moms that were willing to volunteer. So a teacher would approach me and say, "Hey, I need 5 volunteers for this day, for this activity or event or whatever." And then I would, go on the phone and start, calling everybody and see who would be available. So those kind of were the things that I started out doing. And then, as the years kind of went by, I started to focus as well on the charity work, because that is a big component of who I am. I love giving back. I love supporting a charity, specifically the ones that focus on women and children and or children. So I did quite a few years. I've supported the Rainbow Society here in Calgary. They're a charity that provides support for children that have a chronic illness. And so I've done quite a bit of work for them, just helping at events and things like that, or supporting them during their casino times. And then there's another charity that you're also familiar with, is Made by Mama. So that is my main focus. I prefer personally to focus just on one charity, because, there's so many things to do in a day. And so like if I gave to, multiple charities at once, then my time would be too split. So right now I do what I can for Made by Mama here in Calgary, and they're a beautiful grassroots charity that I love and adore.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they're a great, fantastic group. When you think about, well, going back, so you've restarted many times, like over and over and over and over again. And I don't imagine it gets easy. Do you find that you go on autopilot and it's just like, okay, well, here we go, and here's my checklist, and here's what I need to do? Or what would you say is your process?
I am a checklist kind of girl. You know me well enough to probably know that that's who I am. But that is, I kind of go a little bit on autopilot to, I have lists in my head. I have physical lists of things that I write down of, this is what I need to do. I've got different processes for those kind of moments. I haven't had to move for quite some time. So if if you told me tomorrow that I would have to move, I'm sure it will start floating, but all, bubbling back up again, but I would be a little hard pressed right now to, spit that all out. But I was in a very specific flow, because I did it for so many years, and it was, every couple of years there was a move, coming up. So you do get used to, like, okay, if you have certain subscriptions, to deal with those kind of things, and to tell friends and neighbors and family, and organize parties for the kids and, to say goodbye to their friends and all those kind of things. And to then start looking ahead, right? Where am I moving to? What do I need? What can I bring? Sometimes there are certain moves where you can bring all your stuff, your whole household, and then there's moves where you can only bring your personal belongings. Well, what is going to come, and then the focus again, definitely when the kids were little, it's on the kids, like their favorite stuffies and their favorite toys and those kind of things will come. And then, sometimes you would say, well, I'll leave my books or I'll leave my this or my stuff because, that's just the way it went. And that was okay. I don't regret any of that. Some, oftentimes things would land up in storage, and then, several years down the line when everything came out of storage, then it would be Christmas again because there would be things coming out of storage and you kind of go, like, oh, I had that, right? I totally forgot that I owned that. So that was kind of funny, but yeah. So over the years, I've learned to kind of scale down on belongings and things like that. What's important to me and what's not important to me, and it's easy for me to let go of things. I don't necessarily hold on too much to belongings and things like that because it's just stuff, right?
Yeah, I
I've
totally
got some
agree.
special things, some books that I probably would never get rid of. I've those kind of things, but other than that, there's not too much that I'm really attached to that I would say I couldn't part with at one point in time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this brings me to your marriage aspect, because I know that was a big starting over experience as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you learned and discovered about yourself in that too?
Well, I discovered that I'm strong.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very strong. It was a really hard time in my life, where I was at one point separated from my children, and as the main caregiver of the children, um, up until that moment, that was a really hard time in my life because the children ended up living with their father, and that's what they wanted. The kids were about 12 and 14 when my husband and I got separated, and so it was one of those moments where you kind of go like, okay, what now? I found myself in the shoes of where a lot of men find themselves in,
Mm-hmm.
where the men often will leave the house, where the kids are, and they go live somewhere else, and then you know at times we'll see the children and but not be involved with the day to day, etc. And so that was tough. That was it was a really hard time in my life. There was a lot of tears, that were flowing, and a lot of moments where, I was like, wow, I'm not too sure what to do next. And then I also found out how strong I was, who my friends were, and the incredible support that I've received through that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've learned that, when you go through those hard times, and really up until that moment, that was really my very first time in my life that I was really facing something that was truly incredibly hard. Before that, if I look back, life was pretty much a breeze. It was, yes, I've moved a lot, and yes, I had to start over many, many times, in new countries and in places where I had no idea where the next grocery store was, that was before GPS and things like that, where you would just, turn on your phone and your maps and you just figure it out that way now. Back then, you had nothing. And so you were relying on other people to help you and support you. And then it's nice always when you move that many times to different places with children, because your children are your gateway to
Oh,
the
sure.
other world.
Right.
Yeah, which is beautiful. I've always noticed that it was always a little harder for the women who showed up without children,
Wow.
because they had a bit of a rougher time,
Mm-hmm.
getting started. Whereas kids, they make friends, they see somebody at the swimming pool or on the playground,
They
or
bring
you
people
know,
together.
their first day of
Yeah.
school, and they had to each other as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which was nice because both boys are very, very close, because of that. I think because they had to start over in most places first by themselves, just by being, together,
Mm-hmm.
and, discover their surroundings, etc., and then go from there. Um, but when our marriage fell apart, it was, it was a dark time in my life, and lots of lessons learned, lots of knowing that I'm not alone, that I have, incredible people surrounding me who will always be there for me, who will always support me and have my back. And then also that I have beautiful, strong children
Mm.
who are have turned out to become amazing men with beautiful careers and very loving partners. So I know that despite what went on along the journey, that we've done something good because they
Mm-hmm.
landed well. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Well,
and I survived too.
yeah.
Life moved on,
Yeah,
right?
life moves on. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Well, and what were some of the like what did you do any personal development during that time, or were you just kind of floating through life and just waiting for the next thing to happen, or what did you focus on during that time for yourself?
No, I've definitely looked for help. I had some professional help. I saw a psychologist for a while to receive some support, and then I've been searching for a lot of spiritual help as well.
Mm,
So I received quite a bit of help of different spiritual teachers of mine over the years, and still, up until today, because there's, still some wounds there that, I know it's a big onion, right? That I've been peeling back, peeling back, peeling back, and I know I'm not done with that. I know that there's more work that I can be doing, and will be doing, because I'm very open to. So I have some beautiful people. I've done lots and lots of work with you,
mhm,
and then I've got some other spiritual teachers in my life that continue to support me, and new ones that will at one point come onto my path. And I think that's one of the things that has really helped me, come out of the dark tunnel that I was in. Like I would say the first 2 years after, my marriage collapsed, were the hardest, and were, because I was not with my children, there were moments where and it wasn't that I wasn't seeing them, but it's not, it's different from, seeing them occasionally, even if it's every weekend or every couple of weekends, to, from seeing them every day,
yeah.
and taking care of them and things like that. So it was a very black and white kind of moment and time in my life. And yeah, so a lot of spiritual help, Reiki, healings, all those kind of things. I've
Mhm.
welcomed those, and I know that they've, contributed a lot to my well-being and my ability to move on from where I was at.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Powerful. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I just love watching your evolution. And even just in these last 8 years, every time I see you, you keep becoming more and more vibrant from the inside out. I've always seen your light, but I see your light getting brighter and brighter and brighter. Like it just radiates out of your cells, out of your face, out of your pores.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I must say, I'm in my 50s now. Like I said earlier in the very beginning, I'm 53 and a half. And I just, life is just getting better and better. It's beautiful, despite everything that's going on in the world with all its ugliness and hard moments and things like that with COVID. And, life is good. I'm in a good place. I'm happy. I feel very loved and cared for by the universe and everybody, my friends, my family. My kids are doing amazing. So, I don't have anything to complain about, really.
Mhm.
So thank you for seeing that in me.
Of course. Yeah. I love seeing, and that's the growth and the embodiment is is how I look at it, right? Is embodying the joy and the happiness and just being it in the world. And you are so that for so many other people. And I see you show up in the world and in power, in the way of service, as you mentioned, especially those charities. And I could see you, and you do that for everybody that you come into contact now. Is I know that you're a very powerful space holder, and you hold that for us, so many others. I would say that that's definitely one of your superpowers.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Holding space is, it's one of my superpowers for sure. I
Hmm.
never saw it that way, but I've really become to understand and own it for the last several years, where I was like, yeah, it's when people, whatever they're going through in their life, people usually somehow, some way or another, they will end up on my doorstep,
Hmm.
either literally or figuratively, and I'll help and support them the best I
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
by holding space and, you know, sending them good energy and love and checking in on them, and sometimes literally holding them,
Hmm.
and right now with COVID, it's the air hug, but it's still on.
So tell me a little bit more about how you got into event management. At what point did you decide that that was kind of the avenue to go? Because I know you've been kind of checking out a few different avenues over the years, and and I would say this is definitely a calling. You know, it's in alignment with a lot of, even as you've shared a lot of the work that you've done, working with charities and especially eWomen Network, which is, being a managing director, hosting events every single month. And so at what point did you decide that it was time to move into your own business and start running events for others?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, I've been doing this work. So if you look back at my life, I was quite involved in the church as a child, and there were different events and things like that. I was on a youth committee that organized events for the youth, and I was a part of a group that would always organize the coffee, because we would serve coffee after the service, and but you had to, start making the coffee before the service, and things like that. And I helped. I was one of the people actually who headed up the kind of like the childcare during the mass and things like that, so parents could be in the church, and I was coloring and doing crafts with the little ones, so parents could be in the church uninterrupted type thing. And so that's kind of where my journey started. And then with all the things that I mentioned earlier that I've done in my life, and where and even just the moving pieces, right, which was a lot of organizing and thinking things through and stuff
Yeah,
like that, and finding solutions for problems,
yeah.
and things like that. It's it is part of my beingness, it's who I am, but I never thought of myself that way. And so I've been helping, so there's a company called Make Your Mark. They facilitate training for entrepreneurs out of Vancouver, who came to Calgary in 2014 with their events. And I originally started with volunteering for some of their events, helping them out. And then I was like, you know what? I would like to do that. I would like to be your girl here in Calgary, because I already had done for, quite a few years by then, the managing directorship for eWomenNetwork, where I'm hosting the monthly events. And I had observed one of the ladies from the Vancouver team would fly in, to Calgary, doing, what she did. And I was like, I can do that too. And so I was like, so she trained me. She, showed me the ropes, and I must admit, Monique, she has been an amazing person for me, an amazing trainer, somebody I look up to immensely. And so she, taught me the ropes of larger events. So larger events of, like a couple of hundred people in the
Mm.
room, and experiential events where there's, different activities happening at different times and things like that. So I learned that, and but I, for some reason, have kind of compartmentalized that for myself and thought, that is just doing what I do for Make Your Mark, and then I have, eWomenNetwork, and I have my other stuff. I was doing some, coaching, and I had some, mastermind groups on the go, and I was like, okay, but that's what I do for Make Your Mark. And then I did event management for some of my friends for some of their larger events. But I did that for free, just as a friend, because that's who I am. And then I was, last fall, actually, I was helping one of my girlfriends with one of her events. And I had a team of 6 people. So I can do events by myself, from the back of the room. And I can also lead teams. For Make Your Mark, I sometimes had like 12, 15 people that were working underneath me that I had to train for the event, etc. And I was doing the same thing for my friend Michelle in Banff, and a multiple day event. And I can't remember exactly how this transpired, but she said something from the front of the room. I'm sitting in the back of the room, listening in and, just holding space for the room itself. And I had this moment, this epiphany, this aha moment where I was like, oh, I can do this for other people where they pay me. And I still crack up, just even to think of that that it had never occurred to me that I can actually charge for that. I do this on a regular basis for other people. So that's how that kind of started. So then I became more serious and created, eVentManagement.guru to, actually show up in the world with my own company and start doing it for other people. So that's kind of how that went last year.
And how would you say the transition has gone?
Good. Yes. I'm loving it. I love doing events. It's beautiful. It was easy. Within 48 hours after I had that epiphany moment, I literally had my first client. And so like my official paying client. And it went only up from there. So I just love it. I love, supporting the hosts. I love for them to know that they can just show up and do what they do best, and they don't have to worry about anything else when it comes to their event. Everything else is taken care of. And I've also, now had to go online with events.
Exactly.
As many people had to, right? So I recently did for the same friend, Michelle, she hosts a annual retreat in Mexico, and of course that was canceled, but she didn't want to cancel the retreat. But it's a week-long retreat, and we did it online. So, and it went really well. So I know it's all possible. And there's, like I said earlier, and it's actually a quote from John Lennon: "Is there are no problems. There are only solutions." I wanted to say there are no possibilities, and I'm like, that's not the right P word. Oh gosh.
Oh, too funny. Yeah, I think, it's this whole quarantine experience has definitely brought out adaptability, massive adaptability in business. And I've really kind of loved kind of sitting back a little bit and just watching, especially a lot of the bigger companies and bigger organizations that really heavily depend on in-person live events. And I've watched a lot of them pivot on and hosting their 3-day live events in person, online, to retreats, to and I think that's the great reminder we can still have amazing experiences online, in group gatherings, and we have the technology and the support and the ability to do it. um, it's and it doesn't, life doesn't stop, right? Just because, certain aspects stop, it doesn't mean that our whole life and our whole business has to stop, right?
Yeah, there's there's a lot of people that got into shock mode once COVID hit, and we're sitting on the couch, waiting for it to blow over. But this is not something that's easily blowing over. And even though we're loosening up things here in the cities, I personally believe that we haven't quite seen the end of it all. And so online is the name of the game. And if you were not with your business online before, then this is the time to do at least something online. Even if it's meeting with your clients, and because there's still a lot of fear out there. There's people, who live with people that have compromised immune systems and things like that. So they don't want to put themselves into a place where they meet up with others or have other people touch them or whatever, right? So it's, I think it's a crucial thing within a person's business right now to have an online component.
Absolutely. Well, and just running the events online, I even just for myself, I attended like a larger group a little while ago. Like it was earlier, but probably about 2 or 3 months ago. And I was really interested because she had two people on her team that were there supporting her. One was kind of running the back end, one was running, making sure everything was fine with technology. There was one person who was constantly posting in the group, getting conversation going. And it was just, to me, it was just interesting to watch the dynamics of it, just because maybe not a lot of people knew that that was happening, but I always look at a group and I am always like, okay, what are the roles of everybody? Like, who are the attendees? Who are the people? So I'm always watching. I'm a master observer. Um, just getting a lay of the land just to see how things are being played out and planned out and experienced. And it was just really interesting to me how, because I'd been to her live events before, and it really, because I'd had that experience in person, and I saw some of the names, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, they're doing the back end stuff. And it was just really seamless, actually. And it literally felt like I was still in the room with her. But I've actually found online a little bit more powerful because I get to see everybody, instead of taking, just being able to concentrate and see one person at a time. You can have change your views and you have the adaptability even on online to see what you want to see and see what you want to focus on, or it can be on video, it can be off video. You don't, there's so many different options too. So what
Mhm.
would you say, what are some advice for people who are thinking about doing some online programs or are maybe holding themselves back? What are some questions that maybe they should start thinking about, or why would they even hire you?
Well, the key thing is not wanting to do it all by yourself, because there are so many different components when it comes to, hosting your event online.
Mm-hmm.
So, like a simple example that I like to give, for instance, is the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's
Love the chat.
oftentimes so much happening in a chat
Mm-hmm.
box, definitely, if there's a larger group. So if you're trying to teach and you're focusing on what you're saying, and
Mm-hmm.
you're downloading information, or however you present your talk, when there's all kinds of stuff going on in a chat box, that can be incredibly distracting. So to even just have a person help you with that, keeping an eye on questions that are being asked, and kind of compile those so that at one point you can address those questions. Or if you, for instance, are teaching about the top 5 whatevers, then there's bound to be somebody in the group that goes like, what was number 3 again,
Mm-hmm.
so so then if you have, as you're going through your points, have somebody put in the chat box point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, so then people can just read it. Sometimes a teacher may mention a book, for their favorite author on a specific topic that they, highly recommend for their audience.
Yeah.
Add that to the chat box. So the chat box, because it's so, there's so many things that can happen there. So even if you, for instance, have like you want to send direct people to a special link of you want them to sign up for one of your programs, for instead of you putting that link in talks, do that. Have somebody who knows about technology, and that people can reach out to if they, for instance, having a hard time getting online.
Right.
If they forgot what the password was to get into the Zoom room, if that is
Mm-hmm.
required for some reason,
Mm-hmm.
if they're being asked that. All those kind of things, right? It's little things, but if you have to deal with that as the event host on top of the teaching,
Mm-hmm.
it's just too much, and it becomes too chaotic, and there's so many directions that you're being pulled in, then that it's you're losing kind of a solid foundation for your teaching. So because then the distractions get the first base, and it kind of stops the flow of everything else that's going on. And so yeah, so that is really important. That is, for instance, that chat box, because there's so much that can happen there.
Mm-hmm.
And also even, being mindful of sharing with your audience. And I've started calling it chat box coaching.
I love it.
Because there are a lot of very well-meaning people on your line, in your audience, that, you know, somebody might make a comment in the chat box, and then suddenly you have like 4 or 5 different people started giving them advice,
Mm-hmm.
right? While you're teaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think, you know, that's another thing that I would love to pass on to people who are going to host events online, is to kind of you need to create a safe container.
Yeah.
And I have received feedback, for instance, from you know, my friend's retreat that I supported her with, the Mexico at Home retreat, that people actually felt more comfortable to go deeper and be more open and honest when they were just on a screen versus being in person somewhere. So
Interesting.
I found that very interesting
Yeah.
feedback, actually, because I had not expected that.
Mm.
But yeah, so creating that safe container, and then also putting parameters around what the chat box is used for.
Well, I think I think it's an opportunity for people to feel like they're in control too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been interesting because I've had some, discovery calls and conversations with people, and when they got uncomfortable, they literally just shut out of the event. They just like go off the call and ghosted me, and I never heard back from them again.
Interesting.
But it's just that, I think when you feel like out of control in certain aspects of your life, and if you feel like you have some kind of control, but also the willingness to stay like that's really, really powerful. But there is that I didn't expect that, because when you are sitting in face to face, it's an opportunity to really just sit in the silence and hold the space sometimes. And then you get and everybody has different aspects of their personality, and you get the runners who are just like, I'm out of here, man, delete, and I've had that too with coaching calls with some people who are like, I'm so tired, and they're distracted, and they're like, I have to go to the bathroom, and they don't even give you a chance to respond, and they just hit that button, and okay, all I could do is wait. So
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of coaching, because, you know, there's
yes,
only so much you can do from your side of the screen, right?
exactly. Yeah,
If they
no,
say they're going to go to the washroom, and, you know, they disappear for 10
and
minutes
hope they
because
come back.
yeah, not much you can do about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been and even just posing different questions, because some people have gone silent or they just kind of disappear, and then you have to get really crafty and creative and just really softly invite them back and softly invite a different level conversation. It's definitely just an adaptability of navigating the online world, is very different, very, very different than being in-person events, not just the events, but also in person, or coaching, teaching, educating. It's been fascinating watching even people doing more, like there's so much going on in Facebook Lives. There's way more advertising. I don't know about you, but I've seen advertising like shoot through the roof in a really big way, and I'm always curious about, well, how profitable are you being in that advertising and being visible? And I think, too, there's different ways of running events, and finding different ways to gather. I've been dabbling in, I mean, I've been in I started a Facebook group during COVID, or the quarantine experience, and I grew it to 1,000 people in 8 days. Like, that was so
Oh,
crazy.
I've watched that. That was magnificent to see. You did a great job.
It was so fascinating just to watch. And I was just like, I had lofty goals, but I didn't anticipate that. Like, that was insane. And just the behind the scenes, and like there was on average about 1,500 people a day being invited to the group. Not, and then of course, for them to come in. So, but of course it was it's a strategy. There's lots of different forms of strategies. And I've been playing too in different forms of, I don't believe we have to do a lot of heavy lifting, and just doing business very different now. We're being called to do it very differently, but we don't have to pay through the nose for advertising and marketing. Like, there's so many other ways to to do it in more of an organic. I believe organic is still a very powerful way to go, and nurturing and building relationships obviously is a really powerful way to go. But there is, you still have to. I believe everyone will find their zone, and everybody's looking for someone to connect with, and they'll find that person.
I agree. Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you're right. It's all relationship based. That was already a trend. I think that was becoming more and more important over the last
Hmm.
even couple of years, but it's even more so important now. I think coming out of COVID and everything, people are looking for connection and honest and genuine connections, and
Hmm.
not just random ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think too, as going through the quarantine experience was really looking at who are your groups, who are your support networks, and what are some avenues, what are gateways and avenues in. I like what you said earlier about using your children were the invitation into different relationships, and the ones who didn't have those relationships really struggled, right? So, it's the same thing with entrepreneurs. I believe networking is absolutely one of the best ways to start nurturing and building relationships. Which then you get introduced to so many other groups, even through COVID. Oh my gosh, like I was networking in Australia. I've been networking all over the States. I've been plugging into all kinds of different groups and facilities, and new friends and new relationships have sprouted up all over the place, in ways I never anticipated, but I just kept saying yes. I'll show up to that event. Sure, I've got time. I'll do that too. But they were all online events.
Mhm.
So I believe I'm excited for you and the possibility that lies before you, because I do believe there's a huge opportunity to do more online events. And to even do bigger online events. I know I've been toying around with doing an online retreat as well. That can be very deep and very experiential, and there's lots of different tools in the rooms.
Mhm.
And actually, this is a good question I'd like to ask you. So, even just looking at different platforms, do you feel like Zoom is the way to go, or are there other platforms that you've been kind of experiencing or toying around with for larger experiences, larger groups?
I think Zoom has the best, most stable platform. They've done a lot of work, and I'm sure they, will continue to work incredibly hard to make it, continue to up level their game as well.
Hmm.
Because of course Zoom, was already doing, pretty good job before COVID hit, but then COVID hit and everybody suddenly had to go online, right? Like
Yeah.
there's whole offices that suddenly had to send their
Yeah.
staff home,
Mhm.
work from home, that didn't have any, infrastructure, outside from, like Skype or Zoom or anything like that, right? Sometimes larger companies may have like an internal system that they work with, but a lot of companies didn't have that, so everybody went to Zoom,
Mhm.
which caused some issues at times, et cetera, et cetera. But I also know I have a little bit of an in because my son actually works for Zoom
I
and Amber.
know. I remember a conversation. I'm like, man, that kid got in at such a good time.
He did, and he's doing extremely well. I'm
I
super
have
proud of
no
him.
doubt. Because
Yeah,
he's in sales, right? It was
yeah,
sales with
he's in
Zoom, and
sales,
it's like,
and
oh boy,
yeah,
he's
he's
doing
doing
amazing.
incredibly well. So I personally, I favor, Zoom
Hmm.
personally.
Hmm.
I think it's a very good platform, and there's lots possible. So you can have webinar style where you would,
Hmm.
if you would just teach a webinar for hundreds of people, um, where they can just see you. You don't have all the little windows like the Brady
Hmm.
Bunch kind of,
Right.
little pictures.
Hmm.
And then you have, the setup like this where you can have, still a lot of, you can host a lot of people, and so, but everybody can see each other, which depending on what you're teaching, if you're doing a retreat, then you want this, you don't want the webinar style,
Hmm.
um, because you want people to be able to see and interact with each other.
Hmm.
But yeah, I personally, favor Zoom. I'm sure there's some other,
Hmm.
platforms out there, that
I'm sure
work
there
as
are
well.
too. Yeah. I
But
some of the, like one of the events that I was on quite regular, it was a program that I was in, and he had on average like 400 to 500 people per call per week. And he would do, the his view, his speaking view, and then he'd flip it around and look at all the groups of people and randomly select people to coach or, to do whatever with the program. And it was very slick. Like I was actually really impressed with how he navigated through it with hundreds of people on the call. And he's been using Zoom for a very, very, very long time. And so even a lot of the leaders have been using, and I mean, I've been using, not that this is a a Zoom commercial or anything like that,
No.
but it is important to look for the right tools to make sure that you're set up for success, right? So
Oh,
I've been really impressed just looking at a lot of the leaders in the industries who've been, and I've been using Zoom for years. And I've been doing lots of online programs with Zoom too. So I definitely would say it's one of the better ones to utilize.
Yeah, like I said, my youngest son works for them in Amsterdam, and so he even said, Mom, if you have a question or anything like that, just ask and I'll find the answer for you, or whatever. So it's kind of nice to have him in my little hip pocket here.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, how timely, perfect
very
timing, divine timing for him. And I wish him so much success. I know
thank you.
I can imagine how well he's doing. That's super exciting. So as we're just coming to the end of our call, any other tips or any other insights that you'd love to share about doing online events or some things to think about or questions to ponder before they do their next event without having support?
Um, well, key is to to be prepared, right? If you are deciding to do it all by yourself, then make sure that you know how everything works, right? If you're planning to use a PowerPoint, know how to share the screen and things like that. So people are very forgiving.
Mhm.
Definitely if they know that you might not use if you're always in person,
Mhm.
people are very forgiving when you're click the wrong button or things like that. And if you wanted to run smooth, make sure that you do your own homework, that what all the buttons mean and how to mute people as they come in and things like that. That's one other thing I think that's really important, is to set your Zoom up that people, when they enter, definitely if it's a larger group, that everybody is muted,
Needed.
because
Mhm.
nothing more annoying that when you're in the middle of your spiel, somebody comes in late and you hear their dishes, they're clanging their dishes, or they're stirring their coffee, or the dog is barking. It's
Mhm.
and then if you have to then stop and say, whoever just came on the line, can you please mute yourself? That's one of the things that would
Mhm.
drive other people stir crazy, including
Mhm.
me.
I hear you. That drives me crazy too.
So that's probably another tip that I would love to share. Yeah, and you can set it up in the back end that anybody who enters the room is automatically muted.
Yeah. Well, I love that you talked about coaching earlier and how to set up your chat for success, and how to set up, there's lots of options if you read them clearly, you can set them up. I mean, I've been doing Facebook Lives through Zoom. I did a whole hour conversation talk through Zoom. I did my signature talk through Zoom. It's been very interesting working on just lots of different possibilities and making it work. So, it's very been entertaining on this side of things.
Well, and it makes the world smaller too, right?
Yes.
So if you were originally, just doing everything in person locally, but if you have the ability to attract clients from everywhere, then online is a beautiful space to be in and attract people from all over the world. So
Hmm.
it makes, being online, I think, has really lifted the boundaries,
Oh,
you
huge.
know.
Well, and I think
So,
too, like there's so many opportunities too with like telesummits. There's telesummits, there's been conferences and events with multiple speakers. I attended they called it a Live Aid for entrepreneurs, where
Oh
they
yeah.
had a 24-hour event where they had speaker after speaker after speaker. And then they had definitely had the support staff that were there as well, live retreats, like the possibilities are endless. So I think
Yes.
that's what I'd love to leave people with today is just really thinking outside the box, that your business doesn't have to be so, straightforward, local. There's so many possibilities and opportunities to serve a larger audience globally from your home, right? From behind
For
that
sure.
computer
Yeah,
camera.
that's right. Through change, anything is possible.
Yes, I love that. Thank you for that. So, thank you so much, Yvonne, for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your beautiful heart and your wisdom, and I always appreciate and love our time together. So, you can connect with Yvonne. Her business page is on Facebook, eventmanagement.guru. I'll also be posting the link just down in the show notes below when the event goes live here. And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. So appreciate it. Please comment, like, and share. Until next time, just continue to bring hope, love, and light to the world. And we'll talk to you soon. Abundant love. Thank you.
Bye.